Welcome everybody to today's webinar hosted by Partners for Sacred Places. I know some of us are still logging on and tuning in, so we'll just take a moment to allow all of our fellow attendees to get settled and join us right now. Of course, we know this is a wild time and typical schedules may have been upended, but it doesn't mean necessarily that any of us are less busy. So of course, everyone is moving to and fro, joining this webinar and that one. So we just want to make sure we give everyone a chance to log in and be comfortable and make sure they can have their full attention on today's topic. Okay. All right. Well, I think we've given everybody a chance to tune in. So good afternoon. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy right now during this very unique time. Partners for Sacred Places is extremely grateful and excited that you've all chosen to spend some time with us, especially a very valuable hour with us this afternoon for this presentation, Stewardship, Triage, and Recovery, Strengthening Giving During and After a Crisis. I'm Joshua Castano. I'm on the staff here at Partners, and I'll be serving as the moderator for today's webinar. The slides and a recording of this session will be available later this week. Look for an email from Partners if you've registered to sign up for this, or check out our website where we'll be posting a link with the slides and the recording. We know that for a lot of us, Zoom webinars may be a somewhat new experience. So I just wanted to go over a couple of key features that will be important and help you participate in today's session. Only myself and our panelists will have access to video and microphones. However, there are two functions that we invite you to use during this session. If you hover over your cursor over the screen, you'll see a little speech bubble. It's a little icon in the bottom half of your screen. If you click on that bubble, that icon, a chat box should pop up on the right. Please use this chat box to introduce yourself, your congregation, and throughout the webinar, please feel free to use it to comment on what's happening and engage with others during the discussion. We will also set aside time for questions and answers at the end. This is actually probably the most exciting and most interesting part of the presentation, I think. I like to think that. So there's another box that's available for questions and answers. If you have a question that you'd like one of our panelists to answer at the end of today's presentation, please use that Q&A box. So that'll be for questions that you want panelists to answer at the end. Again, hover your cursor over the bottom of the screen and you should see a Q&A icon. Click on that and that box will pop up. You can write your own questions or comment and like other people's questions. Also, throughout the main part of the presentation today, the presenters will not be on video, but we'll return to video at the end when we get to the questions and answers. So I'd like to introduce my colleagues. We're joined by Gianfranco Grande, Executive Vice President here at Partners. He brings over 25 years of experience in the management of nonprofit organizations and capital campaign fundraising to his role. In 2012, Gianfranco was awarded the Richard Nickel Award from the Institute of Architects, Illinois, and over 20 years has successfully helped to raise over $80 million. In 2014, Gianfranco was also inducted into the Board of Sponsors of Martin Luther King Jr. College of Ministers and Laity at Morehouse College. He is the past board chairman of the Candles Holocaust Museum and Education Center and a past member of the Board of Trustees of the Council for Parliament of the World's Religions. Gianfranco, do you want to say hi to our attendees today and add anything?
Thank you, Joshua. It's wonderful to be again with you, and I hope that you will find this today's webinar helpful and that can maybe alleviate a little bit of the stress that I'm sure everybody's feeling.
Thanks, Gianfranco. Joining us also is my colleague, Sarah Jones, Project Manager and Consulting Services Coordinator here at Partners for Sacred Places. Sarah holds a Master's of Divinity degree from McCormick Theological Seminary, as well as a Master's of Social Service Administration from the University of Chicago. Sarah brings experience designing and implementing service programs for returning citizens through the Safer Foundation in Chicago, Illinois, and Sarah has also held internships with the Southwest Organizing Project and the International Organization for Adolescents. Sarah is also an active member of University Church Chicago, where she recently completed a term as moderator of the congregation. kudos to you for your term of service, Sarah. Would you like to say anything and say hi to our attendees today?
Yeah, and like Joshua said, I did just finish up a role as moderator of my congregation, and I'm still serving on the finance committee. So these are conversations that I'm part of both personally and professionally. And so I'm glad that we can have some space to talk about that today.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. And again, I'm Joshua Cassano. I serve as the Director of Community Engagement Services here at Partners for Sacred Places. My background is in historic preservation and community development work, beginning my career in Paterson, New Jersey, helping with the establishment of the National Historical Park there, and then moving to help actually bring some of Partners programs to an ecumenical cohort of congregations there in northern New Jersey. I'm, like Sarah, also an active member of my congregation, which is St. Mark's Episcopal Church here in Philadelphia, where I'm on the vestry and serve as the treasurer. So likewise, I know what it's like to be signing checks and looking at bills and editing the statements every month. So hope I can bring that personal perspective to our conversations as well. So glad that I can introduce our colleagues. And I just want to say a little word about Partners for Sacred Places, our organization, before we get started. I know that many of you, hopefully, already know who we are and are familiar with Partners' work. But for those who are less familiar or don't know us very well, I just wanted to say a couple quick words about Partners. We were founded in 1989 and remain the nation's only non-sectarian national nonprofit focused on the work to help congregations and communities strengthen and support and preserve older religious properties and make sure that they are community assets that add to the vitality of their neighborhoods and cities and communities. This is an incredible and unique mission, of course. We're all really proud to serve an organization like this, and we're really grateful for the 3 decades of work that Partners has accomplished. There are sort of 4 themes that help define our work. So without reading a long list of the accomplishments of Partners and what we've done across the country, I just want to emphasize 4 of the major areas in which we work. One, of course, is building care and stewardship. So we want to help congregations and communities learn how to do the best and make the right decisions in terms of planning and capital projects for their historic buildings. Second is engaging communities, helping congregations and communities build partnerships and build stronger bridges between them and learn how to speak and communicate with each other. The third is training and capacity building for congregations. This reflects all of our work to provide tools, resources, and training that help congregations grow in terms of their leadership capacity, their ability to do fundraising, to take care of their buildings, and to reach out and engage their community. And lastly, pulling all of these many threads of work together is our approach to community-wide fundraising. This is our vision for the ability of historic sacred places to raise funds from a diverse, wide group of stakeholders, friends, allies, constituents that go beyond the members who sit in their pews on Sunday mornings. So we really want to reach a wide network of people to help with that fundraising. So fundraising is important to us. And with that, I want to ask my colleague Gianfranco Grande to start us off and lead us into today's presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Joshua. This is a very important topic because it's about everyday's life of congregation. How you can pay your bills, how you can pay your people, how can you help and support your ministry and community, and how can you plan for next year and for the future. So we are bombarded by information, data, facts, number, opinions. The matter of the truth is that we are still into a big bubble of question marks. We don't know exactly where the future is going to go. But we have a little bit of certainty when it comes about the past. This country has been always very generous. In fact, if you look at the Giving USA data about giving of the country, in terms of philanthropy, you can see some very unbelievable and amazing numbers. Before the COVID, in this country, we're given in charity $427 billion, which is an enormous amount of money. Yes, every dollar that is given was given for philanthropy was accounted. So you can see that not only the accuracy, but also the consistency of giving. Interestingly enough, though, I want to point out this, the largest number of this big pie, this 427 billion, does come from individuals and charitable bequests that basically are planned giving left, by individuals. So we put them with the individuals. So the number is amazing, 77%. And everybody usually is trying to find the money coming from foundation, yet you look, it's only 18%. So as is important that we keep looking for support from foundation, even in these times, keep in mind the individuals are still the largest numbers for donors. It's important to put this in perspective because philanthropy stewardship does not happen in a vacuum. And therefore, even as we move in the future, obviously the number will be very different. So this 427 billion will be much smaller. However, having seen some hard time before this, like after September 11th, for instance, there was a crisis where all philanthropy was going into one direction, so other areas were suffering. And then the crisis of 2008 and 2010, I can tell you that even throughout those previous crises, the level of giving was still very, very strong. In 2010, if memory assists me, was about 300 billion, again with the B, still a very large amount of money. So it's important to keep that in mind. Yet there are some principles of what we define healthy stewardship that we want to share with you and actually strongly advise to follow. The first and most important things, in my opinion, has been my experience, is based on transparency and openness. So you should really know where the money is coming from and where it goes. Right? You need to communicate with your congregants, with your benefactor if they are outside the congregations, funders, government agency that might be assisting you, any form of support that you receive. It needs to be put under a lens and really, really, we need to learn how to talk about money. This is one of the things that I really want to suggest and insist. There is a certain timidity or pudor when we want to talk about money. We don't talk well about money. People have problems about that. But it's important in this time to do it. So publish, for instance, your financials in your newsletter, in your bulletins. Give updates on the situation that it is. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be shy. Don't be, skittish about talking about money and what you need, especially. If I am your donors and I don't know what you need, it will be very hard for me to make a gift. And if I will make a gift or if I give a contribution, I will be probably smaller than what you might need. Another suggestions that we want to share with you is really have a little bit more open finance committee meetings. Tendentially, congregation treat this as a sort of mysterious entity, and the rest of the congregants have no idea what's happened, and they don't know if there is a debt, and they don't know if there is a mortgage or a loan and that kind of things. Oftentimes people tells me, but we didn't know that we were doing a capital campaign. We didn't know that we were trying to raise $1 million. So please do open the doors to these finance committee meetings, because you might receive good advice, and you might receive gifts, and you might also establish a sense of communal support with the rest of the congregation. So I think it's very important to do these three things. Other aspect of principle of healthy stewardship, like we define, and is the communication. I said it before, actually. Communicating is extremely important in this time of needs. So, one of the mantra, here at Partners, we have several mantra, and they started as a joke and they become actually something that we teach. Probably the most famous of all is you won't get milk from a cow by sending a letter. In other words, what we mean, don't just write a letter to your congregation, and this is more for your pastor, so the chair of the stewardship committee, or the person in charge of this. Don't write those letters, say, Dear John and Mary, as you know, we are all struggling, blah, blah, blah. Don't do that. Give donors the opportunity to respond and ask, but try to do it in person. Of course, keep in mind that we need to be responsible and have, the social distancing is very important. It's extremely important right now. You can do it via Zoom. You can do it with a phone call. You can do it if you are, not only 6 feet, but 12 feet away from somebody, but do ask in person. Make specific ask in service bulletin and newsletter, on your website, on your Facebook page, whatever it might be. Do say what you need. If you need to raise $50,000 to honor the budget that you have prepared last year so that the needs of the church and the needs of the people that you're employing are met, please do that. Say, we need $50,000. And if you don't say, people will never find out. Okay, so don't let people live in the dark. Don't let people be, wondering, especially congregation that have an endowment. Don't think that because you have an endowment right now, you can use it indiscriminately. You shouldn't do that. That it is, usually endowments are created by the generosity of people for the perpetuity. And it should be really the last resource for you to use it. So it's better to keep asking money rather than just use the endowment, because the news is that the fact is that at some point these things will end, and these things is COVID, and these things is the pandemic. And you don't want to deplete completely your endowment, for paying the bills, which is unfortunately the first temptation that you might have. Another mantra is dollar is not just a dollar. So help donor really to realize how their gifts are transforming, they become magically acts of responsibility, fellowship, and service. It is important. Show them, tell them the story of how their gifts is utilized. One thing that's close to my heart are those workers that work for your congregation that people don't see. And I'm talking about janitor, sexton, people that come and clean when everybody else has left. Workers, people that keep the facility open and functioning. That's, they are the one that probably, I don't want to say are forgotten, but the one that, we don't think about a lot. And to tell to your congregation, to your donors, their gift, their sacrificial extra gift they're doing in this particular time is going to support a family of people that are trying to, make their ends meet. And that's, I think, is an act of openness that we should really consider these things. Use narrative budget, not just number. Lots of people have problems with spreadsheet and numbers. They are maybe embarrassed. They maybe not telling you that, but the narrative budget is something that explains how the money are going to be spent, what they're needed for, and so forth. And celebrate milestones and the impact during, your services, even if right now are all virtual and so forth. And again, be grateful of the gift, be grateful of your donors, and say thanks to your donors in public and privately, and not just the one that reach out to in their pocket, but even the one that maybe help with other aspects such as gifting kind and make reparations and that kind of thing. So this is, I know there is a lot to digest, and I know there is a lot to think about it, but those are some of the principles that we want to suggest. And now we want to look at other aspects of the healthy stewardship, and given in a for a different reason, in a different way. So I'm inviting our friend Sarah to tell us a little bit.
Thanks, Gianfranco. So I think this quote from Pope Francis says it all. And for those of you who are joining by phone, the quote is, "I ask you to ensure that humanity is served by wealth and not ruled by it." So all of our faith traditions have a lot to say about money, and some of it is very explicit. Congregations with healthy giving cultures don't shy away from talking about money. They talk about its proper place in our lives and the kind of priorities we should have for distributing or investing our individual wealth. All of our scriptures have some beautiful language about financial generosity and how it makes a better world possible. And that's an extremely important function of faith communities, even right now, to help people have a healthy and generous relationship with money. And it's up to the leaders of the congregation to emphasize that giving is a spiritual discipline so that it becomes a joy and an act of faithful response. And your traditions and judicatories have an abundance of resources for how you can do this in your own congregations. And we've started to see a lot of articles from them about how to continue that interpretation specifically in response to COVID-19. And now I want to turn it back over to Gianfranco to talk a little bit about the unique challenges that we're being faced with right now.
Yes, Sarah, thank you. And the current challenges, you know about that, so I don't want to, bombard too much, this webinar with what I'm telling you what are the challenges. But speaking with people, we realize that one of the most important, if not the biggest challenge, is that in America, actually, the vast majority of individual donations, the one that for the stewardship, happen during a worship service. Well, it's equal about 78% of it. But now, worship services have now, they are online, so we are not in person, and people have a hard time to put money into the plate when they're passed around. And especially for the segment of members or attendees of churches and synagogue and so forth, that they're a bit older and they have hard time to follow all this new technological input. The other challenge is that the unemployment rate is increasingly rapidly. Right now, here we have on our slides is over 20%, but I think it keep growing. And last week we added another 4 million. So why that's important? Because there are two types of gifts. One, they come from assets, and they are the biggest, the largest gifts that go usually towards a capital campaign or a leading gift for a campaign. The other one, the one that are, that we receive every Sunday, they come from salaries. And obviously, if people don't have a job or if their salary is being cut in half, there will be a consequence clearly on the annual stewardship, because that's what we are talking about. Obviously, stock market, all that is very confusing. It's very increasingly confusing. We don't have clear signs, and we can count on, a usual, what we had for the last 10 years, a comfortable amount of return in our investment that we can say, well, this year we give this to our church or our synagogue or our temple, our mosque. That might not happen so easily this year. So it's another of those challenges. And really understanding the challenges, we will be able to win this fight. And in fact, we want to talk about, how to win those challenges. And I'm asking Joshua to give us some advice.
Thanks so much, Gianfranco. Well, just to reiterate and maybe add a little bit more detail to something that you emphasized earlier, which is transparency. A particular nature of the challenge we're facing is the need to stay in communication, the need to still feel connected, to still feel that we have communities that are thriving and in touch with one another, that we're not letting anyone fall through the cracks. So transparency is a really important value during this time. Something we'd like to also encourage everyone to think about is not to panic, but to be honest and to embrace the confidence of knowing that you have an amazing congregation. You have incredible assets. You have incredible members. You have people who care about your congregation and your house of worship. And so can you really emphasize that? Can you build on that strength in the midst of this crisis? Again, we want you to emphasize the transparency that's necessary around describing your needs and its extent. It is urgent. It's something that needs attention and a response. And one of the best ways to provoke that is to be absolutely crystal clear about what it is that you need. Don't be shy of publishing your shortfalls, depending, of course, on how you communicate about finances in terms of your congregation's culture and embracing best practices around transparency and communicating about financial needs. But we still want them to think about being really specific. And also, don't think you have to hide what it is exactly that you need from congregations. As Gianfranco mentioned, a lot of different examples of the kinds of needs you may be facing, from payroll to existing bills that continue. One area that we always find it's really important right now to talk about is reminding your members that your building is still there, even if you're not worshiping in it, and it still has needs, and it still has costs associated with it, even if no one right now is quote unquote using it the same way that you were before. So that's still an economic need for you. So be clear about this, be transparent, but do it in a spirit of confidence, embracing the assets of your congregation. I'd like Gianfranco to jump back in to say a little bit more on some of the ways that we make that ask to our congregation members.
Yes, thank you, Joshua. One of the things I want to say is, as a part of asking for what you need, if you have a bill that is due, talk to people. That's the part of being open. Right now there is an understanding that the situation is not easy for everybody. So you can talk to some of your vendor, making a payment plan. Even some of the utilities company can give a period of grace. So, but if they don't know, they can't, and they will keep sending bills. So that's very important to keep in mind that you can negotiate some of these things. This is not time to make gentle and polite, simple requests for the offerings, but be practical, make the ask, and tie ask to specific needs. For instance, the maintaining the staff salaries and wages, including hourly workers. I mentioned it before. Help your ministry partners who cannot currently, provide their usual services. Think about, for instance, if you have a school or you are housing a kindergarten or something for children, and they cannot gather, and so the teacher cannot be there, and it become a problem. So assistance for ministry partners, I think, is very important. And should obviously not forget a specific support for all the related assistance for this pandemic, both in your congregations, but clearly in the wider community. Don't ever forget to be a church. Don't ever forget to do good, even when the times are hard and you are afraid and you're scared. So the specific support for COVID, I think, is not only morally right, but also will show to the wider community that you really are a church, you really are a synagogue, you really are a place, the house of God that works for the good of the wider community. I think it's going to be important, and it can translate with amazing and surprisingly unexpected generosity. So those are some of the things that you need to ask. But there is another secret, another thing that is very important, and I'm going to ask Joshua to tell us about. Right, Joshua?
Yes, Gianfranco, you've got it. So one of the things, and I love this kind of topic because maybe this can be my little soapbox, as it were, is getting comfortable with digital giving. One of the most amazing facts is that most or majority of congregations have online giving options. They already exist. You already have the tools. However, the information is sort of abysmal that maybe only 24% of adults who regularly participate actually make a digital contribution. So now is the time more than ever to come into the 21st century, as it were, and really embrace this option. Churches and congregations and houses of worship and synagogues are in many ways really behind a lot of other nonprofit and other types of community serving organizations that are really making the most of online giving and making it easy for people. So that's the key, making it easy. A lot of congregations come to us and say, well, should we use this tool or that tool, or we want to buy Realm, or we want to do this. The tools are there. Some are a little bit better than others, but they all kind of do the same thing. The key here is the people part of the equation. How are you going to make sure that your members know about your online giving, they know how to use it, that your staff or other leaders on this topic have already anticipated the questions that people might ask and have answers prepared, that you have some information to guide people into embracing this. So basically, what's your on-ramp plan? How are you going to on-ramp your congregation into digital giving and really emphasize this as a tool that's not only crucially important now, but will actually aid you in the long run? Because what you're doing is just giving more chances for people to give, people that are far away. You may start getting gifts regularly from people who have a connection to the congregation in the past, but maybe can't worship with you now, but can because they're coming online, who are so far away. One of the most interesting things about online worship is seeing that lots of people in the wider network of the congregation have been able to stay in touch. So the same thing with digital giving. If you're making it easy and you're providing the venue, so without having, the grand offertory in the middle of a service or other kinds of rituals that emphasize giving in person, we really suggest finding another opportunity, another ritual, another moment where you can bring the attention of your community to generosity and to giving on a regular basis. Maybe it's a special message that goes out every week where you link to your online giving and you have a special stewardship moment to remind people about why this is important. Maybe it's a moment you make during your online worship if you're able to broadcast some kind of online worship or gather digitally, where you actually say, okay, and now here's our moment of doing our online gifts. Whatever it is, and we know you're incredibly creative and resourceful at coming up with opportunities like this, but really find another opportunity, and multiple ones, in fact, to have a ritual around, or a moment to really focus people around giving and generosity. And again, with making this as easy as possible, you may just have to do a lot of work of holding people's hands and finding Sherpas who can bring them up the hill. One of the best stories, I like this one a lot. It may sound a little outrageous, but I think it just shows the love and resourcefulness in congregations, was that there was an older member of a congregation. What they did was that they printed out the instructions for doing online giving, mailed them to her, got her on the phone, and walked her through on the phone as she sat in front of her computer to actually learn how to do this. That was an incredible thing. But that's the kind of detail to getting people on board. Of course, some older members may have reservations, and other members that are less comfortable with technology and have really legitimate concerns about privacy, especially privacy around financial matters. So you may have to, anticipate some of those questions and really work with them on that. And we can say a little bit more later about that. So this really represents kind of some of the more important points we think around getting on board with digital giving and really emphasizing it. Not just relying that link is on your webpage. Put it in your newsletter, put it in your emails, put it right on the front page of your website. Link to it during your Facebook live stream. Really, put it out there all the time. So I want to actually ask Sarah to help us think a little bit more about how giving is actually an important part of the response that congregations are making in this time of crisis.
Thanks, Joshua. One of the hardest things for me, and I think for a lot of us right now, is a feeling of powerlessness to meet this enormous and growing need that we're seeing. And social distancing rules out a lot of the kinds of support that we usually give. And we know that a lot of the really active members of our congregations are in that higher risk age bracket, which means we don't want them volunteering anywhere other than their homes. But what we can still do is give. In fact, monetary donations are the best form of aid right now. So making that pledge, tithe, or offering in full and on time is a way to help. It's going to be up to the faith leaders, the finance team, the worship team to help communicate that. And we've heard of some congregations turning their general benevolence fund into a COVID relief fund, both for their own members and for their community. And that really helps drive home that message. We've seen some faith communities talk explicitly about members who are still employed, donating all or a portion of their stimulus checks. And we want to lift up the impact that people's generosity is having right now. You're able to keep paying staff. You're able to keep providing congregational activities online. You're able to help members who may have lost their jobs. So let your members know that they are still making a difference and that they are a part of the relief effort by giving. And most importantly, continue to serve. Continue to do the good work that is part of your mission as a faith community. Remember that fundraising is a ministry because it makes other ministries possible. People need to know that their faith community is responding and adapting to this crisis in their communities, whatever that need looks like right now. So what you don't want to do is press pause on any of your ministries or activities. People still need religious education. They still need fellowship opportunities. They still need spiritual care and worship. And it's really important to promote and publicize the great work that your congregation is doing so that people will know the real world impact of their financial gift. And also so that the community around you sees that your congregation is part of the relief effort. And I know that this has been a lot of information, and the clergy who are attending this are probably already feeling really overwhelmed. Y'all are doing amazing work, but it is a lot of work. Y'all have had to adapt to this situation really quickly, and we know that everyone is really looking to you for direction. And so we would want to encourage you to look to your lay leaders to help adapt your existing ministries and fundraising strategies, or to start new ones in response to this crisis. So be specific, not only when you're asking for donations, but for other kinds of help as well. Your members are creative, they have energy and time, and often they're just looking for a blessing and permission to offer their ideas and talents. You don't have to do all of this alone. And so now I'd like to turn it back over to Gianfranco to summarize what we've discussed.
Thank you. You know, to wrap it up, this this webinar, and folks, we understand, we realize that there are so many questions we haven't answered and so many things we haven't said, you know, but let's try to make this simple. So practice financial transparency, tell the story how it is, and ask for the money and the gifts that you really need. Communicate your need, communicate the impact that the gifts are having on the life of the congregation, and express gratitude. It's never enough to say thank you to people. Emphasize really that giving is a faithful action, is something that you know, like Sarah told us, it's fundraising is a ministry because it allows other ministries to be possible. Super important, adapt to the new reality of this online engagement. For many of us, for the one that belongs to a little bit more senior generation, you know, it might be harder. But if you can't do it, then ask somebody in the congregation to help you. It is important to really integrate the digital giving into the congregational culture, because after the crisis that we are living in, there will be probably a consequence, an emotional consequence. We will do things in a different way. And maybe this online culture will be the salvation for many smaller, especially congregations. Make, ask, and celebrate on every platform, like the newsletter, the website, social media. Tell the story, tell your story. If you record the success that is unexpected, just let the world know that this is happening. Don't panic, that's very important. Joshua reminds us not to panic, because it's never helpful. So ask for what you need, and with the confidence and that your members will step up. I have seen over and over and over for a quarter of a century how generous people are. And it's always surprised me every single time. And I think it's very important. Don't underestimate the goodness of people and keep having faith, because that's what faith is also. Recruit lay people. Don't work by yourself. Don't try to do everything, but recruit people with talent, people with experience, and and try to really talk out, reach out if you don't have enough answers about the stewardship and how stewardship can happen in your congregation at this time. And again, Sarah reminds us, keep serving your congregation and your community, because that's what you are here for. That's what we are here. We are called to serve. And if you don't serve in a time of needs and crisis, when? So this is part of what we all are called to be, people that offer support and help.
Great. Thank you so much, Gianfranco, for that wonderful wrap up to the topics that we've addressed in this presentation so far. So with that, I really want to get into our question and answer section. And it looks like we have a couple of questions already popping up. So please, if you haven't seen it already, there is the Q&A box. It looks like two speech bubbles meeting, I guess, representing questions and answers. So click on that, and that's a place where you can enter your questions. So I will look at our questions and I'll field them to our co-presenters here, and we'll take probably about 15 or so minutes more of today's time for these questions. So what are some suggestions that you may have for committees working with pastors who have aversions to traditional fundraisers? This is a really good question. Gianfranco, do you want to start?
Yes. Try not to think of fundraiser in the old school, the cheesy character that, it's asking for everybody. There are no such things anymore. And if somebody's like that, you should not work with them. You should not use them, obviously. And, you can ask experts how to do it, and for instance, if you have some of these questions, we will be very happy to give you individual assistance how to approach these type of things. But if pastors, religious leaders, they have a problem with asking money, with the concept of fundraising, please try to change your view on these things, because it's really, honestly, is the way of the future more and more. Fundraising per se, which I'm going to share a secret with you, I don't like the word fundraising. I am not a fundraiser, yet I helped to raise a lot of money in my life. And fundraising, it's something else. It's really a ministry, and is about the ability to talk of something that is key to the life of every day. No money, no party. And if you don't have funds, you can't help people. You can't pay your people. You can't keep your building open. So try to, be a little bit humble and put your old conviction aside, and try to work through that. There is lots of people, lots of institutions that could help with information, and we are one of them. So we'll be happy to respond to any particular questions you might have on this subject.
Great. Sarah, did you want to add? I think that you had some thoughts here about this topic.
So these traditional fundraising, one of the things, like Gianfranco was saying, is that traditional fundraising right now is kind of out the window. And so, really thinking about how to move online, and especially moving towards digital giving and ways that we can ask people to make digital gifts is probably the kind of best way to go.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah, for adding to that. So I just want to look at one question, and it looks like we have a really healthy dialogue happening in the chat box, which is great, because we always love creating an opportunity for you to learn from each other and share information and resources amongst each other as well. So this is a question about PayPal, and then also, we use PayPal, but what else can we use? Vanco is an option. So Gianfranco, do you want to say something about this? I have a thought too, but I'll let you start.
I don't want to monopolize the conversation because then
Okay.
people might say that I'm the only one to answer. Please, Josh, why don't you tell us your thought?
Well, I would just say there are a lot of different tools, and there's a couple of things to think about. One of which is, what are the fees that are associated with using it? So what are the fees with the transfer that's happening? Is there a percentage that's being cost? Something like PayPal is really well known to a lot of people for the most part who are familiar with doing, any kind of buying or shopping online and digital commerce. So that's kind of an easy one. So with all of them is just look at how it works for you. Do you need to create, do you need a system that's integrated with a database for managing information about all of your donors? What's the percentage? How does it help you track donations and follow up with donations, especially in terms of thank you or statements of giving, that kind of a thing. So some are going to be more complex and do a lot more of these things for you, and some are going to be very simple. You're just basically getting donations coming in. The other thing you can always think about as well is that members can set up bank transfers. I mean, they can set up a system where they can do, online banking has come really far, very far the past few years. And so they could actually set something up with their bank directly to do an automatic withdrawal every month, to help pay a pledge, etc. So that's another thing to think about. Actually, Sarah, you might want to add a little bit to this.
Yeah, so I would say, again, there's a lot of different options out there. And if your finance team is anything like my finance team, like adding new platforms can often lead to very prolonged discussions, right? And so we would encourage you to use the tools that you have, even as you are trying to find new ways to do this, right? Joshua brings up an excellent point about banks. Banks make this very easily, make this very easy. People can set up with their own bank automatic withdrawals to their church, and that way they don't even have to go through some kind of online system, and that's particularly helpful with older members who are not as comfortable with things like PayPal. And I would say that, as Joshua was emphasizing earlier, the trick to this is really making it a part of your giving culture, right? So making sure that people have access to these different tools, that they feel comfortable with these different giving tools, and that it becomes part of their regular giving practice. So there are different advantages towards PayPal, Vanco, Gively, all of these things, right? But the silver bullet here is not one system over the other, it's how it's integrated into the giving culture.
Absolutely. There are some, easy tithing is another one that, it's very popular. It's a good system. Can be on an app, and there are different costs from $0 to, I believe, about $40 a month that you can, that you have to pay if you're going to use it. And so it's convenient. You can set up automatic donation. You can pay with credit card, debit card, so there are lots of things. Donors can choose also to have their transaction fees automatically added to their donation. So you have to explore all these platforms and to see which one is the best for you. But there are a lot out there, so, you can do a little bit of homework. And if you have a hard time with the homework, again, we are happy to help you.
Yeah, and each service should also have a lot of information about how to implement and how to make the most of it. All of these providers in terms of software and other tools are going to want to make sure there's information so you can get the most out of using it.
I'm sorry, Josh, the very important message I want to send you is this. It's not a tool to solve your problem. It's if you change your mind and then you learn how to use those tools that will help you right now. There is no magic wand, and what we're insisting a lot in approaching these challenges and the solution from to these challenges in a very practical way, but it's a cultural switch that you really have to do.
Yeah. So we have a great question here from Rochelle Stackhouse about creative ways to do offering in virtual worship. Sarah, I think you should start us off with this one.
Yeah, thanks, Rochelle, for this. This is something that has been really exciting to see people experiment with and play around with. The things that I've seen that are most helpful is that we know we can't, place a physical check in the offering basket, right? But looking at what that is supposed to represent in terms of the worship, right? So at that part in the liturgy, making sure that there is a space to, as Gianfranco said earlier, really focus on generosity and focus on gratitude, right? So doing things like, I've seen churches have people lift up, like physically lift up representations of things that they are thankful for, and then giving some space during the worship service, either through a song or through some other kind of like pre-recorded performance, for people to visit a link if that's what they want to do right now, but then also remind people that they can visit that link after service to have that digital giving, right? There's also invitations for people to write down immediately, maybe things that they are thankful for or things that they would like to contribute to the relief effort. Again, it's not a check that's going to be just like contributed immediately, but it puts things in people's mind and people are writing things down, which again is very good for the thought process and very good for people to think about a gift that they are committing to. So there's a lot of flexibility here. There's a lot of space for creativity, and there's a lot of ideas that are coming out. And I think that really talking with different clergy and lay leaders just in your networks is also going to give you some good ideas.
I think there's another question. Gianfranco, did you want to add before we move on?
I'm fine.
Great, thank you. There's another question here. We have a couple more which I think are interesting. I hope we can get through some of these. Elizabeth Lott has a question here. Her focus has been, their church has been, their congregation has been specifically on the general operating budget. They've done 2 specific asks for COVID disaster relief in the area. However, their larger capital campaign has really been on hold. But her question is, if we're home for most of the year, that seems impossible to avoid. How do we consider long-term giving in an intense season of crisis?
Well, that's a interesting question, and thank you for posing that question. And Joshua, thank you for filtering this question. Let's not confuse the annual stewardship with the capital campaign per se. It's our experience, because maybe many of you don't know, but we also work as consultants for capital campaigns. We help congregation to do capital campaign. Is that our experience has been that, a strong capital campaign does help actually an annual stewardship, believe it or not. Many things is the opposite. One is for both. It's valid the point that we made before, which is never stop, don't stop. Okay, you have strategized what you do first. You have to revisit, some of the steps that you have to take, and adapt the new to the old, and vice versa. About the long period, what to do in a capital campaign, about thinking later on. I think that it's important to have that conversation, how that campaign can impact your actual annual stewardship right now. If it's not well done. One of the things I have noticed, again, that if you do the 2 things in silos, the capital campaign and the annual stewardship, if there is no communication between the teams, if there is no communication of messages and all that, you can mess it up both. And right now, you don't want to do that. Right now, it's very, very important. So don't halt the capital campaign, trying to work actually ways for which larger donors understand your situations and they're willing to wait. Keep them engaged in conversation. Just a phone call, it's enough. And focus on the day-to-day needs of the annual stewardship. Again, it depends on the congregation status. It depends if your congregants are responding and are giving, or what is the level of giving versus what it was last year, and all that kind of thing. So bottom line, keep working, keep doing it, don't stop. Keep talking about, be very open, and have a plan. Plans is very important. Now a plan will help you to weather the storm and to go safe to the shore.
So there's another question here. It's not maybe necessarily entirely COVID-19 response related, but is an important question. This comes from Marjorie Gebracht, which says that she's struggling to tap higher level donors in her parish, as the parish is against the rector knowing what people give. The treasurer does not want her to know this and will not release who has paid their pledges up front, so that she can won't even release that information so she could send thank you notes to them. And a couple of people have chimed in that they have similar situations. So this is an interesting one, and I know that it varies by church culture. So maybe Gianfranco, do you want to start? I think we've talked about this before.
Yes, and I'm going to give you my own personal opinion. I don't like fundamentalism. I'm sorry, and time of crisis, important time of crisis, dramatic time of crisis like this one should teach us to think in a different way. So maybe you don't want to divulge the exact amount of money that Mary and John Brown have been giving, but you can say that they did. Okay, I think that we have to, if there is something that COVID is teaching us, is to stop making assumptions, because think about it. 2 months ago, 3 months ago, nobody on the Western world, Western Europe and United States would have thought that there was going to be a pandemic that will stop everything. So let's not take life for granted. And therefore, change some of your practice. You might take those practice back later on. You might be careful as you modify some things. I'm not saying that you should become a revolutionary and start stomping on the barricades like in Paris in the 18th century. I'm not talking about that. But what I'm talking about, to modify a little bit and don't be a fundamentalist. Fundamentalism is never good. And to say, no, this is the way we've always done it. This is part of our culture. In a time of crisis, it might not be, the best thing right now. Because again, it goes directly against what we were talking at the very beginning from all the three of us about openness. Openness doesn't mean divulge secret. Openness is to discuss issues and to adapt. It's also democracy. And that's I think is important to keep in mind.
I want to jump in, and maybe Sarah has a thought, since she does have the MDiv here. But I know that in the Episcopal tradition, priests, when they are ordained, vow in front of everyone to serve both the rich and the poor. A lot of these rules in congregations derive from an anxiety over the fact that the pastor may spend more time or cultivate more of a spiritual relationship with people who are giving versus people who are not. But I think that reflects an anxiety about really the commitment of our clergy to serve all people. And we know that they are committed to serve all people, that they take it very seriously to serve both rich and poor. And so I think we need to maybe that might be one part of the way of opening up people's eyes to this, along with we've got to do something different and we've got to make some changes, which is some real trust in the clergy's ability to really serve all members, because this is really helpful. We know that this is a fundraising standard. The easiest and most effective way to raise funds is to talk to people one-on-one. And, without this kind of information, you're really handicapping your financial team's leadership in being able to understand who has resources, who has capacity, who's giving. There's a lot of different questions there. That's one thing. The other thing I think sometimes is that this is a way for congregations where giving is not as strong as it could be to be sort of protected, because nobody know, it's a sense of, well, the pastor doesn't know, so it actually, I think, in some ways obscures weaker giving cultures in some cases. Not always, but I think that's one of my hypotheses from doing this work for a number of years. Sarah, I'd be curious to see what you have to add to this question too.
Yeah, so one of the things I was going to say, Jim Treese beat me to it in the chat box. So there are different ways that the pastor knowing the giving amounts can be helpful. One of those things is that the pastor can recognize if something's wrong in that person's life, right? If the pastor notices that there's been a significant drop in giving, that can be a cue to say, I probably need to check in with this person, not because they might be unhappy with the church or with me, but because something might have happened in their life, a significant life event that might be causing them some financial stress, and that probably is something I need to check in with them about. And I will also echo Joshua in saying that being comfortable talking about money is something that everyone should be comfortable with in the church. And I've also heard of pastors who have no desire to see what people give, right? And that can be just as tricky, right? And so I will also say that this is a cultural change that has to happen in a lot of congregations, and that means it will take time, right? And so I would say don't expect to be able to change all of this right now, but we can start planting seeds and start talking about money within that spiritual context and thinking about giving as a spiritual discipline. And there are ways to start doing that, with maybe one of the end goals being a better communication about what people are giving with the pastor.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Oh, pardon the ambulance in the background. So we've reached time, and we want to be respectful and mindful of everybody's time. So I just want to say thank you so much. There may be a couple of other questions that perhaps we didn't get to answer live, but please, if you want to share your questions with us, our emails are up there, so you can email any of the presenters and share questions, especially those that we didn't get to during this time. And I want to say thank you to my co-presenters for their work on this presentation. This is not the end of the conversation. We know that this developing situation may continue and change in the months to come. And Partners is always here as a resource and an advocate for your congregations. So please always feel free to reach out to us with your questions, with your thoughts, and when you're looking for resources. We really want to be a resource that continues here for you. There's a link to our website. There should be a link to our website that's up here, is there, which is sacredplaces.org. So you can find lots of information there as well. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there will be an email letting you know that our presentation recording and the slideshow are available for you. So thanks again, everybody, for your time and attention. Stay safe and healthy, and all the best to you and your congregations. Take care.